right. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you taking a little time out of your day to join us for our second and the Cyber K-12 Cybersecurity Webinar Series. We're excited about the content that MCNC's prepared regarding the firewall service and some of the offerings contained within there, and some additional information around this new firewall service. I won't take up much of your time, but this is the second webinar in our ongoing continual series. We'll have more information about the next one towards the end of this session. And I do appreciate everybody taking time to spend a little bit of time with us, learning more about what's offered in the firewall. And I'll turn it over to Ruthie and her team now to get started with their content. So thank you again.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that.
One other thing, we are recording. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. So this will be recorded and shared with registered attendees after the meeting, after this webinar. Sorry, Ruthie, I apologize.
No, that's great. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. So again, thank you everybody for joining us here today. So just to jump right in, I'm Ruthie Mabe. I manage the security services business here at MCNC. With me from MCNC, I also have Jason Folker and Stephen Walton. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Jason Folker. Been with MCNC since March of 2020. Doing a lot of work on cybersecurity consulting for K-12 and universities, and working with Stephen's team on cybersecurity operations and standing up the firewall managed service.
Thanks, Jason.
So, Stephen Walton joined fall of 2020. If you've got any questions about our security services or support for them, I manage that team and can help get you taken care of.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. So we just want to jump right in. We're going to give you a quick overview of the firewall service and talk about SLAs, talk about contact information for the security operations team, how to get support for the service. And then we're going to do a deep dive into the next phase of our firewall project, which is going to be a firewall hardening exercise. We talked about that during the onboarding. It's something that we're really excited to get started. Then we're going to talk a little bit about firewall logging. There's been some questions about what's being logged, what's not, what's available to the PSU, what's available to MCNC. So we'll go through a little overview there, and then we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. So we do have the Q&A open. Some chat's closed, but Q&A is open. So Stephen and Jason will be answering questions if they're ones that we can answer directly while we're going through the presentation today. If there are questions that seem like they're better served to be addressed, with the group, then we'll save that to the end and we'll touch base on that one. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a quick summary of where we are today. We started this project back in October of 2022. There we go. I was having a hard time with my years. 2022. And since then, we have already successfully deployed 228 firewalls across the state, specifically serving the K-12 community. So that's 87 of the districts and 141 charter schools. On average, we're seeing about 40 million blocked threat events per day. So as a part of the firewall service, we have that advanced threat license on top of the Palo Alto Next-Gen firewall service being provided by MCNC, right? So we're seeing those 40 million blocked threats on a daily basis. And then when you're engaging our team from a support perspective, we're averaging less than 30 minutes response time for those tickets and calls as you send them into our team. So a quick summary of the service level change request types. So something that we want to highlight, it's actually down at the bottom. So we'll go backwards on this slide. We have a daily change management window. So the SLA, the SOW that everyone signed in order to enroll in the service says that standard change window is between 3 and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Our team is proactive and oftentimes pushing those changes earlier in the day between 1 and 3, but we reserve the ability to push it all the way through 6 p.m. So ultimately what that means to you from a change request process is if you're getting standard change requests into us by midday, those pushes are being changed, or those changes are being pushed same day, right? So the categories are standard change, right? Your low risk, things that we've already previously defined and tested either with you or with other firewall customers. Normal changes are things that are also low risk, right? But maybe a little bit outside of what that standard change would look like. We also give you the opportunity, both from an urgent and emergency perspective, to push those changes, to us you call it in, open a ticket with us, you say, hey, this is something that needs to be pushed sooner rather than later because it's urgent or it's an emergency, and we can push that outside of that daily change management window. So we were doing one of these webinars not too long ago, and someone asked, well, how do I define the difference between urgent, emergency, what a normal change is? My teachers are upset because things aren't printing. That might be urgent, right? And so we'll work with you, right? And we'll work with you on helping understand the overall impact of what this is. And Steve and his team will adjust as appropriate. So again, a copy of both the service level description and service level targets are in your statement of work. And as we said before, we'll send this slide to you, or we're going to send the slides out and the presentation out for everybody that's attending here. So from a instant priority, right? So the service level description around that. So P1 being critical, right? Operational incident that the site is completely unavailable, right? High being the site is partially unavailable. Medium being that the regular business is remaining, but there's some specific thing that's being impacted by that. So the SLA around the criticals, right, is 4 hours or less, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. Right. So again, that's something that MCNC is committed to providing you that level of support when it comes to critical impacted across your environment. So Stephen, just wanted to put you on the spot here. Anything else that you'd like to add around the SLA, seeing that you lead the operations team supporting the service?
Yeah, a lot of this is focused around getting actionable information. So when we're trying to troubleshoot or we're trying to put in a rule, give as much information as possible. We can get pretty granular with the rules. So a lot of times if we get a request for, I need this asset outbound, we'll ask you, what's the destination ports? What's the vendor documentation? What's your internal range? And we're trying to create very secure rules following principle of least privilege so that we can, really keep your environment safe and secure. So if we don't get that initially, you'll see some of that back and forth from us. And that's not us necessarily pushing back and saying, no, we won't do this. It's just us wanting to make sure we're being respectful of your environment and not accidentally creating a lax rule.
That's right. So there's a little bit of help us help you, right? When you send in those initial requests, provide us, as much information as possible. And then when Stephen's team is reaching back out and seeking, specific, additional information from you, that is to be able to push that for you both in the most efficient way possible, but in the most secure way possible, because that's really a big, addition that you're getting with the MCNC service offering, is that it's not just firewall management, it's firewall management with the view of security first. Okay, so we'll go ahead and switch into, if I can get slides to move here, maybe, maybe, there we go. All right, so what we're really excited to talk about is the firewall hardening exercise here. So to give you a quick overview of why we're talking about this, what the project looks like. So when DPI and DIT and MCNC all came into agreement around this service, there was a need to migrate quickly the existing DIT firewall customers over to the MCNC firewall service. So what we did, and as I mentioned before, we've completed a migration of 228 firewalls in a little over a year, a little less than a year actually. We were able to do that by, from an implementation perspective, taking the existing ASA firewall configuration and moving it over to the Palo Alto firewall, and it being as similar as possible, right? So we tried not to break things through that migration. We did want to do a risk review with you, so we wanted to make sure that you were aware of specific security risks that existed in your legacy policy that we ported over. And so we did go through that with you and reviewed, hey, these are things that are risky. If there are things that we could change on the fly during the migration, we did. Otherwise, we moved all of those on over into your existing Palo Alto configuration. Good news is it's easy to identify those rules, because as they came over, they were tagged clearly as ones that came over from the previous configuration. So the goal then is, now that we've completed this, right, that the comprehensive hardening and optimization of your firewall policy would be completed after we finished this initial migration. So we finished the last migration at the end of October, and that's why we're here today and excited to kick this project off. So based on our current estimates, we think this whole process is going to take another 12 months to get all 228 firewalls through this process. And this is something I'm going to say here. I think Jason's probably going to say it a couple of times during his section, and I'll say it again. The ability for us to go through this piece of the project is going to be highly dependent on you, PSUs, as you engage with us, right? So we're going to be reaching out. We're going to be providing recommendations. We're going to need approval from you for those recommendations to be pushed to your firewall. So your engagement is going to be what's going to really make this project successful. The overall goal here is for you to be able to really take the fullest benefit of this next generation firewall, right? It is to increase the security posture for your organization. So this is a good thing. We've completed this process for a couple already. I think that Jason will talk about in a little bit here in just a second. So overall, again, I'll say it again, we're really excited to get this project started. And this will be the second time I say it. We need your participation. So Jason, want to go ahead and get started on your set?
Yeah, thanks, Ruthie. So one of the things that we wanted to do was utilize the Palo Alto firewall, the next generation firewall, for all the capability it has over Cisco ASA. The policies were all forklifted in there. They did go through a risk review, like Ruthie mentioned. There was a little bit of massaging of the policy that were overly egregious. The any rules were called out, and trying to harden up that way. But for the most part, you have the same policies that you had on the ASA. Now we want to go back in and see, how can we utilize or push the Palo Alto to its fullest extent and give you the best security posture possible on this firewall? One of the things that we first want to do in this process is identify anything that is zero use in the NAT and security rule set. Most of the firewalls that have been migrated have baked in for several months now. We know which rules are or which policies are not being used. We want to target those and delete those. So the process would be, we would get on a phone with that first phone call with you, review what has not been used. You can let us know. Maybe that is something that you have to have on standby for DR, or if it's related to something else that you need that's not used, but maybe once a year. We want to call those out and properly tag them. But anything else that can go, we just want to go ahead and disable those. And then if there's no kind of service impact after 2 weeks, we'll just go ahead and delete those. We want to identify what your default rule is for internet browsing that uses TCP 80 and TCP 443. We're seeing a lot of those, a lot of the firewalls with those ports mixed in with other ports. We want to split those out so we can target those and see the use of those in the application control center separately from other policies. So we want to split that out. We also want to identify your default DNS and NTP rules, usually by port, UDP 53 and UDP 123. Split those out and put them in their own policies. Some things that we've been seeing across the K-12 now is DNS amplification attacks originating from the inside, causing DDoS mitigation, another MCNC service. We can block that or try to minimize that by using application ID for DNS and NTP, and we have this specific one, and we've already tested that with some other schools. It is the proper way to go, so that's something we want to do and incorporate as we do this hardening process. Some other things that we want to do is those command and control ports, like outbound SSH over TCP 22, outbound RDP over TCP 3389, and some other things. We want to make sure that those are legitimate rules, legitimate ports, and then try to push the principle of least privilege as far as we can on those source addresses, just to harden up those policies. And we'll split those out, and we'll use application ID as much as possible. We also want to see try to convert any of your service rules, those are the port rules, into application ID rules. The Palo Alto is already tracking which application IDs are using the current rules. We're going to examine those and try to put an application ID rule above it and try to let the service rule just die after 13 months. One thing I should mention here is that this hardening exercise is not a one and done. This is going to be an annual thing that we review and certify your policies and your rule sets. It's just this first one is where the heavy lifting is, that we have to do the majority of the work. A couple of other things that we want to do, and probably the one that is probably the most intrusive and you should consider, is we want to implement a geographical block for any inbound traffic, meaning anything coming in, if you have a DMZ, from the internet to the DMZ and also from the internet to the inside. We want to implement a geographical block that blocks anything that does not have a US source IP or a Canadian source IP. We will work with you if you have vendors in some other places. I know there are a couple of PSUs that may have people in the Philippines supporting them. We need to call that out and make sure that's included in that. But what that does is it block unwanted traffic coming into your firewall from foreign sources. Now, this is not to say that your firewall is exposed to foreign sources. That's not what this is. You have an explicit allow policy set, and your firewall is working as designed. So you have a really good security posture now. This is just adding a different layer of security for you that we can utilize the Palo Alto sourcing, or the dynamic group that Palo Alto identifies as those IP addresses from those other countries. We can utilize that, giving you another layer of security. We want to prep the firewall for incident response, which means we're going to put strategic deny rules and disable those all across the policy rule set. If you have a security incident and we need to shut down all traffic, the legacy way of doing it was to just turn off the interface. But what that does is eliminate us from managing the firewall, and also eliminates any forensic analysis of logs going to the firewall, and prevents us from looking at that and trying to isolate sources. So what this incident response prep does is puts the firewall in stealth mode. It drops all bit of traffic going in and out of the firewall, but allows us to manage it and still lets us look at the logs. What's trying to hit, what's trying to get out, or what's trying to get in. That's good information just in case law enforcement or National Guard has to be engaged. They want to know those IP addresses. Some other things that we're going to do is look over the Global Protect local accounts. Most people are using CIE or Google SAML right now, but there are some schools out there that are using the local database. We want to validate those user accounts. We want to validate all your B2B tunnels right now and make sure those are still working well. Anyone that does not need to be implemented right now, we want to disable those or just remove the configuration. I will say we've had 2 guinea pig schools or beta testers go through this with us. We've implemented this procedure into their firewalls now with no incidents or no service interruptions. I can say from the geographical block that one school has already just in 3 weeks, or a little over 2 weeks, we have dropped 1.1 million connections from foreign sources. Another one is almost 1 million that's had it in for 4 weeks. So that is a lot of unwanted traffic that helps your security posture overall. And it is really good to think about implementing that policy. You can go to the next slide.
Anna?
So the way the process will work is when you sign up to get on the list for firewall hardening, that first phone call that we have is going to be a policy review. We're going to go through all of your security policies, all of your NAP policies. We'll call out the ones that are unused and ask you to give us a verbal approval to go ahead and disable those policies. We'll call out some other high risk policies, overly permissive, some other things that we want to do in the policy rule set, review those with you and get your informed consent to allow us to make those changes on the firewall. That's going to be the initial phone call. After the initial phone call, everything else will be handled via email in our ServiceNow case ticketing system. If we do need to get another call scheduled to review some other things that we may have found as we go through the hardening process, we'll communicate that on an ad hoc basis. But for the most part, the process will be just one phone call at the outset to kick it off, and then communication via the ServiceNow ticket over the next couple of weeks afterwards, when we get to the point of deleting the disabled rules. So the entire process should take about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, before we can close out your case and move on to the next school. Ruthie, do you want to go over the schedule here?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I'm going to be sending out a link to a self-scheduler to everyone that already has one of our firewalls deployed, right? It's going to include a general announcement about this project kicking off. It's going to include the link to be able to sign up, and we'll also send this recording as well. So for the folks that were not able to join us today, they get some context as well. So we've started that calendar to begin the week of December 4th. So we have several spots between December 4th and the end of the month, but I made the statement yesterday that we have less than 5 business weeks left in 2023, which is kind of crazy when you consider Thanksgiving and Christmas in there. So the availability in December is a little spotty around which days are available to get on that schedule. So for the group of you that are on this call, I would definitely encourage you, if you would like to start this process in December, to jump on those available slots. Otherwise, starting that second week in January, we're going to open 1 slot per day, 5 days a week, with the exception of holidays, until we get you all scheduled and on the books. So be on the lookout for communication from me. Again, it'll have the self-scheduler in there. It's going to have a link to this recording, and it's going to have the general, outline of what to expect from the firewall hardening exercise. So I think that is it. Jason, anything else that you wanted to touch base on?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. Again,
Okay.
this whole process, I just want to reiterate the hardening process does not mean that your current firewall is not in a good condition. Just want to reiterate that point. You are in a very good condition, especially with the Palo Alto firewall. This is just giving you more security and utilizing that firewall, the next generation firewall, to its fullest extent.
Yep. Thank you, Jason. That's a good point. And one other thing, this is a mandatory process, right? So we do need to go through this with all of you. So if you don't get on the schedule early, we'll be reaching out to try and get you on the schedule in the coming days. So before I switch to the next topic, I did get a good question that came in. If you do not currently have our firewall service and are interested in signing up, then there's a slide at the end that's going to have lots of different ways to contact the MCNC team. And it's just an email to the security services group. And the way that we get you enrolled in the service is we get you a no-cost statement of work that includes the SLA information that I reviewed earlier. We go through that process. Once we have that signed and returned from you, then our engineering team will reach out to look at your current firewall and do the configuration comparison and get working on migrating that over to the Palo Alto firewall config. and then we'll get you on the schedule for the actual migration itself. It'll be dependent on when we can get the equipment in, and that's typically the the thing that'll hold us up at the very end there. But then we pick your date, right? You say, hey, this is a good date for me. Okay, great. We'll do what we can. I know we have a lot of people that are interested in doing migration, over the summer, next summer, which is less disruptive than doing it during the school year. So absolutely great question. If you're interested, I'll highlight again the contact information, how to get started there. All right, so moving on, there's the next several slides are about the firewall logs. So it was brought to my attention not too long ago that even though we talked about it during the migration process, that not everyone has taken advantage of signing up for access to be able to access Panorama, which is the tool that you can use to access your firewall logs, what is available to you. So we'll ping back and forth. Stephen and I are going to talk a little bit about, what's included, how you can sign up, and what we can do from there. So there's a set of information that I can send to you. This is one piece of that. So in order to get access to Panorama, there's two things that are required. One is that during the onboarding process and or since that we have identified a firewall manager and a firewall log access user and or a firewall log access user associated with your PSU. So this is something that, if you recall, Jahari Alston was one of the ones that was going through that process during the migration period. She would have been reaching out to try and identify these users. So we're going through an audit again. If we don't have one of those users, identified for your PSU, we will be reaching out soon saying, hey, we need one of these users. If you have a question of who has been identified for your PSU as one of these roles, absolutely reach out to us and we can determine and or update as appropriate. So you have to have that designation, but you also have to have an NCREN community account. I think this is one of the places that people were getting hung up. So this is the steps for creating that account. And when you have an account and you have one of those roles associated with it, that's when you're able to go through the steps of accessing Panorama. So, Stephen, do you want to talk about what they can see once they get into Panorama?
Yeah, certainly. A little bit of this goes back to what I mentioned earlier about when you're submitting requests to us, giving us as much information as possible. Part of being able to access the firewall, as you see here at the top, is traffic. So if you have a connection that's failing and you can pull the local IP of the machine that's failing to connect, a timestamp, something like that, you can actually go in and look at that traffic, filter by that IP, and the logs will even show you the rule that's being impacted. So if we have a block rule that's dropping it, or if you see traffic that you wish to be blocked, it'll show you the rule that's permitting it. And that's helpful information to let us know, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Can you please take action on this rule? When you work with Jason, you'll see our rule designations of like 0015.0012 for an outbound rule. That's really that traffic logs. That's very powerful because that's what, a lot of troubleshooting starts at, is what's the traffic log saying. Threat logs are Palo's threat ID system looking at the traffic, applying its logic to it, and giving it a designation from informational, low, medium, high, critical, and the action it takes, whether it's just going to be an alert or a drop. Those are, another layer of defense where, like Jason was saying, whether or not a rule traffic's permitted in or out, the threat ID system is still there to look at that traffic. And that may be another area where something could be getting blocked accidentally. We can also create rules around those, although historically we've seen that to be very low false positive and not blocking legitimate traffic. It is another touch point for us. Global Protect is the VPN solution. So if a user is reporting issues logging into VPN, Again, timestamps, user ID, you can go in there, search and filter by that, and get a brief readout of what the failure scenario is, or if they are connecting. And really, it's just giving you some of that same visibility that we have on the security operations team, so that when you're engaging us, you can even provide us a screenshot of what you're seeing, or you can provide us with your search filter or something to, make that ticket a little bit more specific and less of just, hey, can you look at this user? The final one that's sort of cut off here is Unified. That's just a collection of all the other ones. It's a one-stop shop for all of them. I don't find much use in it. That's the logging portion. Policies, we've got security policies, which are your basic firewall rules. Again, you'll see those in an ordered list. You'll see 0005 dot for your inbound rules, 0015 dot for your outbound rules. And while we're looking at this hardening process, nothing is stopping you from looking at your firewall, looking at some of those rules, and making recommendations now. So we recently closed up a rule where a school had a inbound 3389 to one specific server. That was a stopgap for a vendor. They were able to close that up now, and they just said, hey, please close 005 dot blah. We don't need that rule anymore. You may see address groups in there. We recently updated the policy, so to make the rules more readable, if it is a outbound rule, some of the vendors will provide 10, 15 outbound IPs. We'll consolidate that into an address group, AG_vendor Bravo. And you can now look into those. It just helps with readability. So if vendor Bravo changes their public IP range, that's another area where you can specifically reference this rule. This address group needs to be updated. The NATs are NATs. That's where you'll see if you have any school-specific outbound paths, if you have any Zscaler bypasses. Another great area to check, because one of the things we saw when we ported in those ASAs, or those stale NATs, those stale inbound configurations, maybe you can clean those up. Maybe you can reclaim some public IPs. Again, my team's happy to support, answer any questions you see in there. We'll manage the firewall. We'll take on that task, but you just let us know what needs to be done in that environment.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. Again, if you don't have access to Panorama today, and you would like to, again, I'll give you a slide at the end with all the various contact information. We can absolutely get you enrolled, and so we'll get you the documentation for how you set up your community portal account, and we can verify who those users are that will have access on your team, and we can go from there. So let's see here. From the firewall logs specifically, I know we just overviewed, what's available to you to see in Panorama. So I just wanted to give a quick set of definitions around the various log types that we keep associated with this service. So there are configuration logs, right, which displays the entry of each configuration chain. So that was pretty self-explanatory. And then there's system logs, which displays an entry for each system event, right, date and time, severity, and event description. So those two are excluded from what you as the PSU are able to see. So the threat event and event logs, those are the logs that are associated with Palo Alto Advanced Threat Prevention License, right? So Stephen was talking before about where you can see those in Panorama. Global Protect, again, associated with the Global Protect license, and then traffic logs. So the logs that are retained today by MCNC are the configuration system, threat event, and global protect. So the top four there. Logs are available to our team, the security operations team, via Panorama for 60 days. And then we store those logs in cold storage for a year. Those logs are available upon request by a PSU for incident response, right? So the PSUs, what we were talking about before, each of you have access to the Panorama proxy, which will give you access to your local firewall, and it'll give you access to the threat, global protect, and traffic. However, the amount of logs that are available per PSU are based on the device type with the individual PSU, what size firewall you have, and the traffic volume. All right, so in addition, raw syslog is available upon request. That's what I was saying earlier, coming out of either what we have locally from that 60-day period in Panorama or from cold storage. So one thing to keep in mind here, there are no, we are not currently retaining traffic logs. That is part of the discussion that we are having currently with DPI and DIT. So all I can say there, and I can say this because Tim dropped off, more to come. One thing that is now available is that you as a PSU can request the ability to log to your own syslog server. So this was not available before, it now is. So if you have your own syslog server and you would like all of those logs to be written to your local server, we can enable that for you. So just a couple of things, what is and is not included there. Logging is only supported to a local customer syslog server. Only a single logging destination is currently supported. The available logs that we can send to you are those threat logs, the global protect and user ID, and then traffic logs. So that would be the way that you could get those traffic logs today. Logging externally to a logging service is not currently in scope, and logging externally over IPsec or GRE tunnel also not currently in scope. Because it's not been fully tested yet. So what I can say to you, this is something that DPI, requested that we be able to enable for you so that you can get this access if you would like. And so if you do want to make that request, secops@mcnc.org is where you send that request, and we can enable that for you. All right, so I have been saying through this whole presentation that I'm going to give you a slide that has all the different ways that you can contact us. So here we go. So for technical support, portal access, break fix, changes to your firewall config, all of those things from a technical support perspective, you can contact Stephen and his team 2 different ways. You can open a ticket, mcnc.org/support, or you can email secops@mcnc.org, and it's going to do the same thing. For those severity 1, severity 2 type events that you need that more aggressive response time from the MCNC team, those need to be called in. That's 919-248-4141 to get that security operations team. So for informational support, non-technical, onboarding related, if you want to get enrolled, if you have questions about your statement of work, if you have questions about users and access and all of that fun stuff, email securityservices@mcnc.org, and that gets you to my team. Okay, so that being said, I know we said we're going to send out this presentation and slide deck. It's also fun to take screenshots. So I'll give you a second to take a screenshot of this one because it's something that you want to save. So I have no additional content to review with you guys today. So I know we have a few more minutes here, so we can open it up for Q&A. I'm not sure if we have any questions that have come through in the section here. Anything, Jason, Stephen, that we need to address so far? Let's see here.
Ruthie, there's one question here that's kind of general. I'll take it. There was a question about, hey, I've read through the K-12 cybersecurity program website and see lots of different resources and things available to the PSUs. One of the things we may want to do there, yes, each one of the individual services has a contact how to access that particular service, but we would be happy to do a review with you and to say, hey, here's what's on the menu of services, what do you have, and then kind of, point you in the right direction if that would be helpful. So our contact information is on the website, and that comes to Tim leads the program, and then we can schedule that meeting with you, or you can reach out individually about the services.
Thanks, Sammy. So there was a question that came in about specifically having access to review the firewall rules. So yes, so if you have MCNC's Palo Alto firewall service, you can view those rules through the Panorama proxy. So again, if you'd like to request access to that, you can email secops@mcnc.org, and we can make sure that you have the appropriate set of permissions set up if you to be able to get into Panorama, and we'll go through those steps for you. And again, that's the one that's a little tricky because you have to have the MCNC community portal access in addition to having that role set up. What other questions do you guys have? For any of you that have been on webinars with me before, you know I am not a glutton for punishment, so I do not like sitting in silence at the end. So I like to fill what questions do you have with random ramblings? So all right, so Jason, let's see. Oh, great question. So you're currently using a firewall that is not was not DIT or is not MCNC's firewall service. It costs you absolutely nothing to enroll in the DPI provided firewall service through MCNC. So this is paid for by the state, and they've contracted with MCNC to provide the service. So Sammy, I don't know if you want to give a plug for the Friday Institute, the K-12 program page here, that talks about all of the services that are available to PSUs, not just the firewall service. So I don't know if you can paste that into the chat for everyone to see what that link is. That'd be helpful.
There you go. I just replied back with the link to the K-12 cybersecurity website. So that talks about the firewall service as part of this webinar series, as well as all the other program services that are available to all the PSUs. And those are provided, all of them are provided at no cost to the PSUs.
Perfect. What other questions do you guys have? All right. Hearing no other questions, Sammy, where do we go next?
So first of all, Ruthie and Jason, Stephen, thank you all so much for spending time with us to go over this this service. We know it was very valuable for the community. We want to thank all the participants for attending and let you know that our next webinar series for the K-12 cybersecurity webinar series is scheduled for December 13th at 9 a.m. That's December 13th at 9 a.m. And the topic is going to be on cyber asset attack surface management, CASM. It's a new sort of phrasing that we're using. So we're going to talk about your external facing assets and all the different tools and things, how to keep an eye on those. So December 13th, 9 a.m. More details will be coming soon to the community about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Sammy. Well, on behalf of the MCNC team, thank you so much for everybody that was able to join us today. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to provide this and other security services to the K-12 community here in North Carolina. It definitely makes our jobs worth getting up for, and going into the office, be challenging and see very exciting. So thank you guys so much. And if you need us, you know how to get in contact with us. I hope everyone has a great day.